Hello, my name is Paul Mooney and I'm an engineer on the Identity Advanced Cloud Engineering team at Microsoft based in Dublin, Ireland. Today I want to take a look at how we might use PowerShell to leverage Microsoft Graph to get the groups a user belongs to. And by this I mean groups that they are directly assigned to and indirect assignments such as the groups a member may be a member of through nested groups. Before digging in, let's begin with a quick look at what Microsoft Graph is. The overview of Microsoft Graph documentation says, Microsoft Graph is the gateway to data and intelligence in Microsoft 365. It provides a unified programmability model that you can use to access the tremendous amount of data in Microsoft 365, Windows, and enterprise mobility and security. Scrolling down further to the section Popular API Requests, we can see the Get Users in My Organization operation. Before moving on, I want to note that the operation Get Microsoft 365 Groups I'm a member of seems as though it might be of something of interest to us in achieving our goal. So for now, let's just note that the URL refers to a call to the user's member of endpoint. Looking back at the Get Users in My Organization operation, let's click on this. And as you can see, this brings us to the Microsoft Graph Explorer with the URL already completed. As I've not yet signed in, we get the sample tenant loaded here. We can also see here that there are two endpoint versions available, the version 1 and the beta version. Microsoft recommends that for production use we should leverage the v1.0 endpoint. Notice in the lower part of the pane we can see the Code Snippets tab. Selecting it and then PowerShell as the language, we see that the command we need to use is the get-mg user. The first link you see here also takes you to the Install the Microsoft Graph PowerShell SDK documentation. And this will describe how to install the SDK if you don't already have it installed. On the left here we can click on Use PowerShell to bring us to the Getting Started with Microsoft Graph PowerShell SDK documentation. This section describes a very useful command we can use in order to discover permissions that we might require for any particular command. Let's jump over to Visual Studio Code and take a look at this. And here we'll just create a new file. And let's change it to a PowerShell. And let's paste the command we copied in. And in order to just run the single selection here that we have here, we can click anywhere on the line we want and we can just hit F8 or click here. I'm just going to hit F8 on my keyboard. And we can see that the bottom three entries here relate to users. Normally, if experimenting with this, I would try the least privileged permissions and work my way up if necessary to ensure I comply with the principle of least privilege access. Jumping back to the documentation, the sign-in section gives us the syntax to log into Microsoft Graph. Let's copy this and paste it here. And for now, I'm only interested in the user read all. And let's try this by putting our cursor on the line and hitting F8. And here we can see the Welcome to Microsoft Graph message, which means we are connected. If we scroll to the very bottom of this page, we can see that in order to disconnect from Microsoft Graph, we can use this command here. So let's just put that in too. And let's just jump back to the documentation. And scrolling back up, we can see that we can use the get-mg user command to retrieve all users. Or to get a specific user, we can just use this command here. Let's put this in here, and the user I'm looking for will be John Graph. And let's just take a look at what the user ID might be. Now highlighting both these lines, I'll hit F8, and here I can see I'm getting back the user ID. Let's head back over to the documentation. On the left-hand side, we can see the Navigating the SDK link, and this will bring us to the Navigating the Microsoft Graph PowerShell SDK documentation. The section Command Verbs lists the verbs that can be used and maps them to the HTTP methods. Now in our demo, as we're looking to retrieve information, we'll be using the get method, which corresponds to the get verb. The command noun section tells us that all nouns in the SDK's commands start with mg, and we can see the syntax to get a specific user is user ID/ID or user/user principal name. The listing parameters section shows us that we can examine all the available parameters by using the get help command. So let's try this. Now remembering back, we did see a member of, which is something we were interested in. So let's see if we can find that. And with my cursor on this line, I'm just going to hit F8 to run that line. And this brings back a lot of different commands. So let's try and restrict this a little bit further. So all the commands follow the pattern of a verb and a noun, so I've just updated that, and let's hit F8 again to see what this gives us back. So now we can see a much shorter list which just gives us the get commands. On the right hand side we can see the source module, so we can further restrict this by looking only in the Microsoft.graph.users module. And hitting F8 again. And finally, if I only want to see commands that end with member of, I can just add a space at the end of this. And F8 again. So we're finally left with two commands that are at least of interest to us in trying to achieve our goal. So let's check the documentation for these two commands. So here we can see that this will return the groups and directory roles that a user is a member of. Let's look for the other one. And here we can see that this one returns the groups, including nested groups and directory roles that a user is a member of. Because it includes the nested groups, which is part of our objective, I'm thinking we'll try this one first. So before going any further, let's take a quick look at the Azure portal and let's look at John Graph to see what his group memberships look like at the moment. So here I've just gone to the Azure portal, I've gone to all users and I'm searching for John and I can see John Graph. I click into John and I select the groups. And here I can see John is a member of 4 different groups. 2 of these have the word nested in them, so let's just jump in and take a look at these. If I jump in here, I'm in the nested cloud group and I click on members and I can see John Graph is a member. What's also interesting about this group though is if I go to its group memberships, I can see that it's a member of the super cloud group. So John would actually be a member of that group as he's a member of the nested group. So let's just jump back to our script and see how we might continue. So first let's use the get help command to get help on the get mg user transitive member of command. And I'm going to hit F8 to run just this one line. And scrolling up we can see all the details here. The main point of interest to us is that it takes a user ID parameter. So let's try this and see what happens. Let's clear the console first. F8 just to run that. And let's hit F8 to run this command. So here we can see that 6 entries are returned, which is looking good. However, we're only seeing the IDs for the groups. So we're making progress here, but as we're only receiving the group IDs, we need to do a little bit more work to get to our end goal. Going back to the popular API request documentation, we can also see the operation get groups in my organization. Let's click on this to open the Graph Explorer. And once again, we're going to go to our code snippets and we're going to go to PowerShell. So now we can see that the get-mg group might be a command of interest to us. So effectively what we'd like to do now is to iterate over each of the group IDs that have been returned to us and possibly use the get-mg group command to return the names of those groups. And this is the syntax for iterating over those group IDs and sending them to the get-mg group command. With the cursor on this line, let's hit F8 and see what we get back. So finally, we have all of the groups that the user is a member of, including the 2 groups whose membership is based on the user's membership of the 2 nested groups. That is, the 2 groups with the word super in them. Now, as I've been preparing this demo, I've been giving myself different permissions here. So you might actually get an error when you run this that looks something like this. And if that's the case, we can run this command again to see what permissions are required to run that particular command. With my cursor on this line, let me hit F8 again. And these are the various permissions that will work. If you do get this error, we can go back to the top and say add in the additional permissions that we require. If I hit F8 now, I can just disconnect from Graph and then reconnect using this. And if you run the command again, you should get the results back properly. So in this video, we've covered how we might find our way around the Microsoft Graph SDK for PowerShell to retrieve all of the groups a user might be a member of, including groups that they're a member of through a transitive relationship to a nested group. I hope you found this video useful, and until next time, take care.